Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this information session about team development. This topic is really near and dear to my heart, and it's become a very popular topic these days alongside leadership development. So the plan today is to go through why we believe team development is so important, why it helps us create happier workplaces and achieve better results, and walk you through, share how we actually achieve that, what is our approach to team development. My name is Tatiana St. Germain, and if you've attended any of my previous webinars and information sessions, you know I pack a lot of information in just about 20 to 25 minutes with a quick Q&A session, and you have everything you need to start something new. I want to be extremely respectful of your time, and that's why I pack a lot of information into a short amount of time. So without further ado, let's get started. And at the end, after the Q&A session, there will be a special offer. So stay tuned. And of course, how to contact us, all of that information will be available at the end. So what we believe in and what I'm hearing from all of my clients and prospects and when I network around, teams are extremely important, especially cross-functional teams. And when we come together, we want to ensure that we can be productive and cooperative and accountable to each other. So the biggest question is, why is this so important? Some statistics that are revealed, and you can look up our main newsletter, Great People Management, on LinkedIn, and also our good friend, the assessment company, their newsletter, ironically, was also about teamwork, and they provided some statistics that came out of their own research, proprietary research. What we're finding is that 76% of employees are now part of at least 2 teams within their organization. So that could include cross-functional teams, project teams. We put together remote and virtual teams, management leadership teams. 60% of people are engaging with their teams 60% of their time. That's kind of crazy. We're all more collaborative and cooperative, even when we are in hybrid and remote workplace. 86% say effective teamwork is more important to their organization's success now more than ever. That's an interesting development. And also employees and executives cite lack of effective collaboration and communication as the primary cause of workplace failures. And this is what I see in my consulting work and my executive coaching work as well. That communication, it's almost everything can be boiled down, tracked down to communication or lack thereof. People, as if you know me, you know, I always say people are the foundation of every organization. They're the lifeblood of your organization. And teams of people working together are building blocks that make up that foundation and actually the entire structure of your company. So a lot of time and money can be wasted dealing with the fallout of poor teamwork. Another concept I often refer to is Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of the team. Wiley, I'm a partner of Wiley and Sons. They have a 5 behaviors of cohesive team model. And trust is the foundation of this pyramid. I'm not going to go into detail on this topic, but I just wanted to demonstrate again that trust on the team is extremely important. When there's no trust, no commitment, no accountability, that's when things fall apart with teams. And this comes from the State of Teams white paper published by Wiley. 79% of people report that their team members don't acknowledge their weaknesses to each other. When we conduct our team workshops, I see this quite often. Not always, so it may or may not resonate with you, but I do see that acknowledging a weakness in front of others is considered a weakness. No commitment. How often do you go into a meeting or leave a meeting and you don't even know what happened? There was no commitment, no decision was made, or at least you were not committed to the decision. You were just there to spend time. There's no accountability. 59% of people say their team members don't take personal responsibility to improve team performance moving forward. So we have all of these issues, And they not only impact productivity and cause, well, less than perfect communication, it certainly impacts retention. And I don't need to tell you that retention is #1 priority for most organizations today. Yes, we're still struggling in tight labor market trying to find people, but once you find people, how do you keep them? And what I'm going to say is people don't leave people. What they leave is impersonal, disconnected, dysfunctional workplaces. Think of yourself. Have you ever just picked up and moved across the state or even across state lines just because and left all of your friends and family and people you know and love behind? No. If you have a connection to a place, human connection to a place, you're least likely to move. However, if it's a place where nobody cares about you, you don't care about anybody else, well, it's easy to pick up and go and accept a job offer on the other side of the interstate or the other side of the country. So think about that. That creating connections is extremely important to retention. So as we talk about teamwork, big kind of 800-pound gorilla in the room, well, why don't people just get along? What's the problem with that? Why some people get along and others don't? Well, we are thrown in all of these different teams, as I mentioned, cross-functional teams, project teams, etc. But we all bring different strengths and weaknesses to the table. Yes, let's call them for what they are. They're not areas for improvement or gaps or whatever other sugar-coated language we might use. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes when strengths are taken too far, they become a weakness. It's sort of the difference between a campfire that's very useful versus a wildfire that's very destructive. So we all bring a little something different to the table, and knowing what that is going to be critical to productive communication and understanding each other. And also, why we don't see those key attributes about people even when we work with them side by side? Well, it's because people are like icebergs. We don't lead with our strengths and weaknesses. We just portray a certain image of ourselves, and you can only observe about 10% of who the person really is through day-to-day interactions, even if you worked side by side with them. Just think back to what happened during COVID, about March, not even March, but April of 2020, when that reality started to really set in. How some people really stepped up to the plate and showed amazing resilience in the face of adversity, while other people completely fell apart. And by people, I mean leaders, not just individual contributors. So that was all underneath the water surface. This is the stuff that was always there. It's just during regular routine interactions, people are able to put the best foot forward. But when, as we say, ship hits the sand and everything we knew is no more, this is when people are stressed out and tired, and there's a lot of unpredictable factors at play. This is when we show our true colors. So it's extremely difficult, but also very important to know what lies underneath the water surface. What is the potential, the good, the bad, and the ugly? Because again, we all contribute different, unique strengths and talents. And another thing to consider is when we meet another person, those behavioral differences can be perceived as difficulties, and they don't have to be. When I do communication workshops, or when I talk about dealing with difficult people, quote unquote, the first thing I say is that differences don't need to be difficulties. And that's a very important distinction. This is the only reason we see others as difficult, because they represent some uncertainty, and that activates the fear centers in our brain. And once the emotions are at play and fears are at play, the frontal lobe is not operating at optimal capacity. It also takes a long time to get a new team member. I think it was a Gallup poll that said through about typical weekly one-on-ones with somebody you just met, it takes about 2 years to get to know them. And as we established, teams don't communicate well, and of course, lack of understanding causes conflict. So why do you need this information about the 90% of the total person? Well, we are all ships in our own bottles. I should have my husband copyright this message. I really liked it when you said that. We all live in our own heads. We all have we tell ourselves a story. We have our own image of what the real world outside of our bodies is really like. And the other person has their own story. And so it's like we're ships meeting in the night, but we're all in our own bottles talking to ourselves. Also, everything's a matter of perception. Sometimes we're overly optimistic about what's going on outside of us, and sometimes we're also overly optimistic about our own abilities. It's also a matter of perspective. I love this picture. When I work through conflict resolution with some of my clients, I often see this very clearly because where I'm standing, I can clearly see it's a cylinder. But the two people are adamant that it's a square, and the other one is adamant that it is a circle, and the truth is somewhere else. So it's important to be open about the perspective. And as we talk about communication, everything starts with you. That's number one, because you start communication and you have to work on yourself and think about your part in it. And yet not everything is about you. When you hear things that other people say, how often do you catch yourself making assumptions? And if you don't, start observing yourself and start catching how many assumptions you're making. What did you really hear? Did you automatically interpret something that was said instead of taking the words at face value? So again, everything starts with you and not everything is about you. Those are the two rules of my communication training that I work with teams on. And of course, awareness. As team members, we need to be self-aware and we need to be aware of others. When those two are present, we have better results. So to help you understand and know yourself better and understand your teammates on a deeper level, you need information to maximize your working relationships with those around you. And for that purpose, we utilize PXT Select Assessment. That's the assessment that provides in-depth, objective, and reliable information about people. And this is the stuff that cannot be uncovered through day-to-day interactions. So it really helps us dig below that waterline to understand what makes people tick. You may have heard this phrase before. In this case, it's even more poignant. Information really is power. Otherwise, you're kind of groping in the dark, trying to figure out how this person is going to react to this, or you roll your eyes because, oh, this person, they're raising their hand, they're going to speak up against this or that in a meeting, and you don't know why. You're making assumptions. You're inside your own bottle telling yourself some kind of story that may or may not be true and relevant. So information is power. Individual weaknesses are made irrelevant when you work on a complementary team. This is why that foundation of trust is being able to be vulnerable and talking about your weaknesses, your blind spots, as well as your strengths. And when we know everything there is to know about the strengths and weaknesses, those weaknesses will be relevant because you will know how to leverage your team members' strengths. So once again, this is a very important phrase. Your individual weaknesses are irrelevant when you work on a complementary team. And this is what makes the dream really work. As I move into the second part of the presentation and talk about how we approach team development at Great People Management, I would encourage you to start thinking of some questions you would like to ask me. And feel free to reach out to us after the fact to talk more in depth. We'll try to take as many questions as we can. So either direct message me or Smila, my co-host, or just put your messages in the chat. All right, so our approach to team development, really 3 simple steps, but once again, as we always do, we pack a lot of information into it. First, we're going to assess the individuals who are on the team to identify their strengths and weaknesses. I mean, I have a few superpowers, but seeing through people and understanding what makes them tick is not one of them. Even though I've had over 20 years of experience kind of sort of psychoanalyzing people. Everybody's so different and so unique. We're all created unique and different. So it's very important to use a reliable tool that helps us identify those strengths and weaknesses. Then we are going to produce a team report for each team member that will reveal the team's behavioral diversity. There will also be action items that will help them talk about their communication styles, what are some of the behaviors that they need to encourage and develop on the team, what are some gaps that they need to address. So it's a very robust report with action items, which I'm all about that. And finally, the final step in the process is the team workshop, where we bring it all together for an in-depth group discussion. So I'll walk through each one of these steps really quickly. First, I wanted to share with you, if you're not familiar with, well, most people are, if you've attended some of our other webinars, PXT Select is the tool we use for this purpose. It has 20 measurements in total. There's 5 cognitive measurements. Verbal reasoning, abstract thinking tells us about problem solving and reasoning, 9 behavioral traits, pace, assertiveness, sociability, conformity, etc. All the behavioral traits is what we're going to focus on for the team development discussion, but the individual reports that team members receive will have the cognitive measures and their motivational interests also listed. This helps with self-awareness. A little bit more about the tool. It is a normed assessment. So when we look at the 20 measurements on a scale from 1 to 10, all responses that candidates, or excuse me, team members who take the assessment give will be normed against working population. So they see how they score relative to other people. There's no good or bad score. You cannot fail who you are. It's just 1s and 10s only represent 2.5% of the population. So there's a very unique scores. 67% of the people will tend to score between 4 and 7. So are you like most people on most traits? Or do you have something very unique that really stands out in your behavioral traits and that plays loudly in your personality and impacts everything else you do? Those are the things that we need to know about and know how to contain that fire as a campfire and not allow it burn out of control and consume the team. So the 3 things, big sections of the assessment tell us how you learn and communicate, how you react to different environments and stimuli, and then occupational interests tell us about the activities that will motivate you. What makes PXT unique, without going into too many details about this, but because we have 20 traits on a scale from 1 to 10, the number of possible outcomes on the assessment, that's the combination of scores, is over 10 trillion. This is as close as we can get in the assessment industry to capturing somebody's professional fingerprint or occupational DNA. Now we're moving into the team report. I'm going to share with you a sample report, but not the full report, just a couple of snapshots to give you an idea of what it looks like. So first, this is a team table, and it shows the team distribution, or what I might refer to as behavioral diversity on the team. This could be a cross-functional team, or it could be a team of people who work on the same team, like a team of salespeople, or it could be a small office where it's, or let's say a branch, a credit union, and everybody takes the assessment. And we don't want people to be the same because everybody's in a different capacity, in a different position. But when we come together as a team, this is what we look like. Are we all very similar, or are we all very different? And we can have an in-depth conversation about that. And I will address that in a little bit more detail in the next couple of minutes. The rest of the report is going to provide information about what we just saw for each and every trait that we measure. What does Outlook look for this team, for example? We're similar in one respect, we have one outlier. What are the points to consider? And then at the end of the report, as I promised, there will be tips and action items that will show team averages on this. And then the team, probably the most important piece of this entire process is the team workshop. Not just because I tend to provide very good color commentary on all the different measurements, but because this is where the rubber meets the road, and we start to have a very in-depth conversation, and it's almost like a group coaching type of conversation. It's about 90 minutes to 2 hours, and if it's in person, it can go longer. But I've done this successfully both virtually and in person. We will understand what is measured, learn how to maximize the team report, talk about each person and team members on a deep level. We celebrate the strengths and differences, identify behavioral diversity and the gaps, and build an action plan. The action plan is going to revolve around identifying very actionable items that each team member will commit to implementing right after the workshop, around what do they need to keep doing, stop doing, and start doing. What are some of the things that are working really well for you? In fact, things that got you to where you are right now. Make sure that if it's something subconscious, you really think about it and write it down. Words have power, and written words have even more power. You want to write it down and do this moving forward on purpose, not just to give yourself a pat on the back, but also to celebrate your strengths. Stop doing things that are not serving you and start doing some things that you might have identified and had an aha moment during this workshop, during this process. So this is just an example of somebody's plan, action steps with respect to communication, because this team wanted to work on communication. And then we go through team activity, the way the flow of the workshop goes. I will explain to them, just like I explained to you just now, what PXT is, what it measures, different traits. They also, when we go through this, they get a blank graph. Not always, but sometimes it just makes for a fun exercise, and they guess where they are, like on this graph. As I go through the explanation of each trait, they guess where they are. And then we come back together after a break, and they open their individual scores, and then we talk about the team itself. This is what the team looks like for PACE. So tell me about an example when this happened or this happened. How did you handle it? And what's the better way to handle it? And then we again bring it full circle and talk about communication. So before we get to the special invitation, let's open up for questions. So Smiela, I do have a couple of questions. Let me get to those first. Chat. The size of teams we work with, really 3 or more, up to 25. That would be the limit for the team report. But then if we have a larger team, we can break those teams into 2 teams. What if I don't have a very specific problem with my team? Will this approach still be applicable? How this process would be applicable? I actually am very encouraged to receive so many requests recently from teams who are thriving. So these are not dysfunctional teams. They're functioning, successful, great teams who are almost scared a little bit of their own success. And so they want to continue to retain team members, continue to give them opportunities to grow and develop their skills, and opportunities to connect on a deeper level. So here's my great team. How do I keep it great? So absolutely, you don't have to have a specific problem, but everybody's going to walk away having learned something about themselves and their team members for sure. That's all I got for questions. Smiela, do you have any questions? Did we get any from the registration? I know we were collecting some questions in the registration, and then maybe some chat questions that came to you.
Yes, we have a couple of questions here. First question is, are there any specific technological tools or platforms that you would recommend for supporting team development in today's digital age?
Logical platforms. So what I'm going to say about that is, I think, yes, we live in the age of technology and just-in-time feedback. So what many of my clients have been successful at is seeking out a learning platform that is going to provide some of that continuous learning, skill development opportunities, on-demand training and growth. And that seems to be a great addition to any kind of team development plan. And it helps with retention for sure. I can take one more, Smiler, and then we'll let everybody go.
What are some signs that indicate a team may be in need of additional development or intervention?
For teams, because they're made of people, like with any person, you should be more concerned when people stop talking, when they stop complaining, when they stop coming to you, or when they stop arguing. That signals disengagement. So I think that's really the biggest issue with teams I see, is when the whole team or part of the team are withdrawn. So if they're still fighting, there's still fight left in them. That's better than apathy, I guess, is what I would say with that. So look for that with your teams, and perhaps it's individual team members, not the whole team. All right, so as I promised, a special invitation to, there's another chat came through. Okay, I'll take just a minute. How does PXT differ from, or maybe compare to, other workplace behavioral assessment software? Yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions about that. But PXT, just the highlights, it's designed as a hiring assessment. So it has a unique way to measure jobs and then match people to jobs. There's 13 different reports that come with the assessment. So it's truly a tool for individuals from hire to retire. And that's where organizations can leverage this information in a very cost-effective way, because you pay for it once, and then you have 13 different reports that you can use anywhere from interviewing, onboarding, coaching, team development, etc. So I'm happy to talk more about that with you. Thank you, John, for the question. And speaking of that, that's an excellent segue into our special invitation as a thank you for attending this presentation. You can experience PXT Select free of charge and obviously no obligation. What I'm offering is you to take the PXT Select so you can experience it yourself, and then schedule a time with me where I will debrief the results. It's more of an in-depth coaching debrief. So perhaps you want to learn a little something about yourself, walk away with some action items, or we can take it from a different perspective and look at it. How can it be used in different situations? How it can help with your team challenges or help your organization in other ways, and on retention and onboarding side or succession planning side, perhaps. Or since you're attending this, you might be interested in how PXT Fits can help your organization with your next team development project. So please feel free to reach out to us, and we will follow up. So we'll make it super easy for you to take advantage of this special offer. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll sign off. Again, my name is Tatiana St. Germain. I'm an executive coach, talent advisor to organizations, and assessment expert. So if you have any questions about assessments, leadership development, team development, reach out to us. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.